Hello, welcome back to the MLB DFS Slate Breakdown for Tuesday, September 12th. We are back. Baseball is once again the center of the DFS universe. So, we're going to break down this slate. It was a fun one, or it does look like a fun one. It is a Colorado slate. They are by far the highest game total, but there are four others with a 9.5 game total that are, just a little bit behind. So there is going to be some interesting pivot options to go over. Now, before we get into it, what we're going to go over today is we're going to start off by the perfect lineups for both FanDuel and DraftKings, then the winning lineup on DraftKings. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the FanDuel one today, so we won't be going over that winning lineup. But I will shout out to Bulletproof in chat for taking down a contest yesterday. And then after that, we are going to go through the projected ownership for today on pitchers and some pitchers to consider. And lastly, stacks and some stacks to consider. Before we get into it, come join us at LineStar, only $39.99 a month. We had a great first week of the NFL. NFL's in full swing. Come join us. There is no better time to get involved and get into DFS with LineStar. $39.99 gets you all of our props, all of our DFS stuff for all the sports we cover. Come join us. Let's do it. Now, let's get into the fun. Let's get over into these contests. Get over to Major League Baseball. And perfect lineup. All right. Nick Pivetta just going absolutely nuts already this morning. All right. So, perfect lineup from September 11th. We got Woodruff. We got Waldichuk. Surprisingly, there is no Padres stack here. Padres went absolutely nuts. But Milwaukee also had 12. Texas had 10. So there were several other teams that had some big scores, which made it happen. So yeah, no real stacks here. The winning lineup, however, Danny Ohms, you probably maxed it because this is at least your 16th lineup here. You won by 5 points. They had Valdez and Woodruff, so they paid up at pitcher quite, over 20K going to pitchers, a lot here. But they made it happen. They had a Padres stack, a Milwaukee stack, and then a one-off with a Colorado player. So they faded Colorado. They went in on the Padres. It was a very low-owned stack that just went nuts. And it was, Machado and some of the back-end guys that really got it done. So congrats to Danny Ohms. And I'm going to say once again on FanDuel, congrats to Bulletproof in chat, who took down a contest as well. Now, let's get into some fun. Let's get into today's ownership and go over the slate as a whole. So, as we talked about, Colorado Cubs, 12.5 game total. There are several other games with 9.5 being the Red Sox, Yankees, Diamondbacks, Mets. Padres, Dodgers is down to 9. It was 9.5 earlier today. And then the Royals and the White Sox are all kind of interesting spots to attack. Now, we may, be a little late getting some lineups from the White Sox and the Red Sox game today, as they both do have double headers. So just take that in consideration also when you're building your lineups. Now, ownership-wise, we got, another thing is there are some weather concerns, so make sure to pay attention to what's going on. I don't think anything's going to be postponed, but there is definitely a chance of delays, and, who knows when you're over 4 hours out. All right, Brian Wu, 7,900, coming in at 1.x value for LineStar, so he is definitely in consideration. However, we do have to worry about Ohtani coming back. He was supposed to be in the lineup and then was scratched yesterday, so maybe he is back today. Wu does have a problem with lefties, so that would definitely hurt Wu's projection there. If he's not in the lineup, Angels are terrible. 25% K rate versus righty, 283 WOBA, 135 ISO. So if Shohei is not in this lineup, I like Brian Wu. Even though LineStar projection isn't that great, he does have very nice upside for his price. And StatCast data is pretty good, especially at home where, it's a big ballpark and he's allowing 42% fly balls. You don't have to worry about the home run quite as much in Seattle. Next, we got Joe Ryan, 9,500, 1.7x, 16% point projection here. Look, he is against the Rays, who are striking out almost 26% versus righties. However, they are a good lineup. High ISO, almost 200, 340 WOBA. Definitely can hit the ball. Joe Ryan, since coming off the IL, has not been the Joe Ryan he was earlier. 6.43 FIP. K rate is still up, but the StatCast data is all pretty sketchy. 46% fly balls, decent amount of hard contact, very little soft contact. So, it is kind of sketchy, and the opponent team splits do favor the Rays a little bit here. So, but he does have a 25% combined K rate, so there is upside here. It is just a tough matchup for Ryan today. There is some K upside though, and we do have a good umpire, and he's averaging 35% more fantasy points when at home. So he is in consideration, but I don't love it, and LineStar is not loving it either. Freddie Peralta, his price is getting up there, but the guy has been electric lately. 2.69 FIP over his last 5 with a 36% K rate. He is also averaging 36% more fantasy points while home. He's in a good spot today. Miami lineup, is okay, but Peralta is just doing great. At his elevated salary, he's still 1.8x, so he is very interesting today. 27% combined K rate, absolutely in consideration here. Next, we got Lance Lynn, 8,400, 18% owned. Look, Padres lineup went off yesterday, and they seemingly, like all year, like to hit when it doesn't matter, and none of the games matter for the Padres anymore, so maybe they keep hitting, but that is me just being upset that they've sucked all year. The lineup is good, though. Lance Lynn, while he was amazing to start his Dodgers career, he has fallen off a little bit. 7 earned runs against Atlanta, 8 earned runs against Miami. Now he's facing the Padres in a day that it's warm in Dodger Stadium and some light wind blowing out. There is a very good chance the Padres are able to hit, 1 or 2 home runs off Lynn. And in that case, it just matters if there's people on base or not. Lynn is a guy that has a very high ceiling, but also a very low floor. There's big time volatility. With ownership not going here, I think he is a little interesting. If he was high owned, I would be very off of him. Cutter Crawford, next, 14% owned. Yankees are striking out a little bit versus righties, 24.5%. They have a low WOBA versus righties. Crawford has done well versus them in the past. He is going 100 pitches, but the big worry about him is he's just not very efficient and doesn't work deep into games. But with his salary so cheap, he is a little bit interesting. You're just not going to expect a huge score here. Verlander. I really like Verlander today. I am surprised he is not higher owned. With that, I'd be all over him on DraftKings. 26% K rate versus righties for Oakland, 300 WOBA. They do hit the ball hard versus righties with a 180 ISO. But, it's a pitcher-friendly park. I do not mind that, and I would absolutely be attacking lineups with Verlander. He has been a little bit worse lately, 4.71 FIP over his last 5, but he has faced some good offenses, and he has a 3.76 FIP over his last 20. The one issue with him is that K rate just is not what it used to be, where it's, around 21%, but we still do have a 24% combined K rate on him. So I do like Verlander, and I would be using some Verlander today, especially at that ownership. Cal Quantrill, he doesn't have much K upside, but he does likely work deep into the game. So at 5,500, he is interesting. Manaea has some K upside, but won't work deep into the game. He also is probably not actually starting. He probably comes in long relief. So for FanDuel, keep that in mind because you're likely not getting a quality start. Scherzer, 11.3K versus Toronto. Tough matchup, but Scherzer has been very good. So at this ownership, you can consider him, but I just don't really love the price in this matchup. Outside of him, I think the only real paydown option that I would consider is Carlos Rodon. I hate to say it, but look, he is super cheap. And Red Sox are striking out 30% versus lefties. They do have a good offense, so they can definitely get to Rodon, and he's been bad. But there is some upside there at very low ownership, which makes him interesting. And let's check out FanDuel. All right, so Freddie P is getting the ownership here. 10.5K, so much, much lower owned. Like we said on DraftKings, he's in a great spot and he's been pitching very, very well. So it makes some interest there. Next, Joe Ryan. Look, I think he's just going a little bit too high owned against a good offense when he hasn't been pitching great lately. Verlander, I love. 16% on FanDuel. I am all in. Only 10.3K. Him and Peralta are definitely my favorites. I would absolutely consider Lance Lynn at under 5%. We know the ceiling that he has. We also know the Padres have been a feast or famine offense. They feasted yesterday. Maybe they have a famine today. We don't really know. And anybody that tells you they do know is lying. But just with his volatility, he is absolutely a GPP consideration. Brian Wu is way higher priced on FanDuel with good reason, though. I mean, he's in an interesting spot. Just hard to get there on FanDuel with what his price is. If he was $1,000 cheaper, I'd be absolutely considering him. And it still is a slight consideration, but only slight. All right, that will do it for the little FanDuel wrap up here. And now let's get into some stacks. Get over to DraftKings as it allows us to go to 5 guys and look at a little bit more. All right, so obviously the ownership is going to be all over that Colorado and Cubs game, and it should be. Those two teams are the most likely to do well, but with so many other games around 9.5, 10, I think you can pivot off. 100% ownership for the Cubs on an 11-game slate is pretty high ownership. That's each guy being 20% owned. That's a lot. So I don't mind getting off the Cubs at all today. Obviously, they're in a good spot. Flexen isn't great. 5.5 FIP over his last 5, 6.8 over the last 20. So you obviously can get to the Cubs today. They are in a great spot. What I would say about the Cubs, if you're going to do that, get some lower, back end of the lineup type guys to just lower that total ownership. You have the same upside, but you're just fading a little bit of the field and maybe one or two of the top hitters, and you get a much better, more desirable ownership number with still a very good projection. All right, Arizona is also popping up here as a higher owned team. Makes a lot of sense versus the Mets. Budo is not great, and this Diamondbacks offense is good and just keeps on hitting. So I do not mind that one whatsoever. Now, highest projected teams. It is kind of nice that we don't have the Braves on the slate because the Braves are always a consideration. All right, highest projected. Look, we got the Cubs really popping off. They are very high owned, but look, there's this one that is, 20% less owned and still very similar with Candelario in the lineup instead of, one of the top head of the lineup guys. Candelario is a guy that is a boom bust, but can absolutely hit a home run. So I think that type of thing is extremely interesting there. Just getting a little different with the Cubs lineup. Houston's also popping up versus JP Sears. That makes sense. Sears has not been good. 6.16 over the last 5 for his FIP. The A's also have a bad bullpen. Sears hasn't been working deep into games. His outs line is super low. I think it was 14.5, and I still almost thought about going under. So I think it makes some sense here to go with the Astros in a spot where nobody's going there and they've been hitting well. Tampa Bay popping up against Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan is a little bit higher owned, so there is some leverage with this spot, and he hasn't been good lately. So it does make some sense here. And Dodgers versus Waka. Dodgers are always in consideration. Let's go to the value stacks now. Oakland popping up versus Verlander. Don't love it. I actually really do like Verlander today. And without the Verlander being super high owned, there's not really that leverage spot for Oakland. So, while you can always go to them because it's baseball, I just don't love it in this spot. Twins versus Little definitely makes some sense. Little over the last 20, 4.2 FIP. Over the last 5, almost a FIP of 5. Brian Wu, he has been very good this year, but still has a FIP of 4, and he does struggle versus lefties. So it is pretty interesting to go to the Angels, especially if Ohtani, gets back into that lineup tonight, which he could. He was scratched yesterday. All right, now let's go to the ceiling plays here. Ceiling plays, we got Houston, we got Seattle. Seattle's one we have not talked about yet today, but I think they are very interesting. They're going very low owned. Patrick Sandoval can get got. 4.42 FIP over his last 5. FIP of 4 over the last 20. But he can give up some hits. Seattle's at home. So, and they've been hot. They've been raking for the last, 2 months. So, definitely of interest there. And Houston is just all over this ceiling play, which they should be. Sears isn't good. That bullpen isn't good. I think you can absolutely go to Houston when they're low owned. All right, so implied run total, Cubs 6.7. So almost a full run higher than the Rockies, who we have not talked about, and I think the Rockies make a lot of sense too. Way lower owned than the Cubs. Pitcher is a little bit better, but still not great. 4.63 FIP over his last 5, 4.22 over the last 20. And now you put in the elevation and all that, and a high hard contact rate. So doesn't look great for Assad, looks good for Colorado, and they're much less lower owned. Next, Red Sox, 5.1 implied total versus Rodon. Rodon has been bad. You can absolutely stack the Red Sox. I also like Rodon just as a crazy, risky, why not GPP play. We talked about Houston, absolutely like them. Talked about Diamondbacks, like them. The Mets are a very interesting spot. Ryan Nelson just has not been good. 6.55 FIP. 46% hard contact over the last month. High average exit velocity. A bullpen that's just meh. I think the Mets make some interest there for sure. So those are all the highest implied total teams. I think they all make a little bit of sense. Yankees make a little bit of a sense as well, as do Seattle. Don't love San Francisco. Don't love the Dodgers, but I get why you would go there. It is the Dodgers. They're always in a decent spot here. That'll do it for us today, guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to all our videos. It helps us out a ton to just get the reach out a little bit more and feed that YouTube algo so we can keep giving away all this free content. All right, guys, you have a good one. I will be back tomorrow because it's Wednesday and we got no football. Let's go.